Hi designers, Sam I am here, and today I'm going to share with you how to import your typography design decisions from Figma into Token Studio. Now, for some context, I'm about to release a community file which contains all of the Tailwind CSS primitives as variables and styles in Figma, but powered by Token Studio. And as I was working on the typography, I realized that over the last couple of years working with Token Studio, I've developed some interesting habits and shortcuts to work around the unique way that Figma approaches its text properties. So I wanted to share those with you today. I've created a free Figma community file for you to follow along and to save and use as a template for future projects. The link to that file is in the video description below if you want to go grab that now. All right, here's the tea. Figma pairs the font family with the font weight. The font weight in Figma combines the thickness of the glyph, or the character, or the letter, or the number, with additional styling properties like the slant, which you might call an italic. Let me show you an example. So I'm in Figma, and I've taken 4 pretty popular font families and combined them with their weights. And I'm going to flip over to dev mode for a second to show you what engineers see in CSS. So for enter of semi-bold, weight or thickness of the glyph, if we look down here, you can see that it shows the font weight as 600, its numeric value, and that the font style is normal. And if we look over at the semi-bold italic over here and I click it, it's still showing me the font weight at 600, but it's showing the style as italic. And this is fairly consistent if you look at each of these font families. Now, if we were to replicate this in Figma, if I look at enter here, the font weight is showing as semi-bold italic with spaces between. And for Montserrat, it's semi-bold with no space, but then a space after the italic. And if I look at SF Pro, there's a space between semi-bold and the italic, but the B here is lowercase. And for Montserrat, the B was capitalized. And Satoshi actually doesn't offer a semi-bold option at all. They only have a bold option. So this becomes a bit of a challenge. If I'm working with Token Studio because I want to supercharge my workflow, I want to take a file that already has typography fully fleshed out, and I just want to change the font family. But if I just change the name, many of the font weight pairs are going to break. For example, semi-bold and semi-bold italic, because in enter, there's a space between the semi, the bold, and the italic. And in SF Pro, there's a space between semi-bold and italic, but semi-bold is one word. And you can see that there are many different inconsistencies between the way that the text string value of the font weight plus styling properties are combined in Figma. So to avoid this very frustrating manual process of trying to get it right, I'm going to show you how I import them from Figma into Token Studio so that everything works automagically. Let's get into it. So when you open up your community file, it's going to look something like this. And it's going to have each of the instructions that we're going to go through. I'm not going to read them to you, but we're going to follow along. And once you've downloaded from the community file, the first thing I recommend that you do is you duplicate so that you have a copy of the template and you're working in a fresh file. And I'm working in the copy. I'm going to close I'll keep the original open. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to select all of these layers, which I've created with the weight already baked into them. And I'm going to change these to SF Pro. And now I need to check each layer to make sure that the font weight and the font family pairings made it through and they mapped out okay. So thin, SF Pro thin, that matches. Expanded light and extra light. I don't think that that's a match. Expanded is one of those styling properties. It looks like it's a bit wider in SF Pro. So I'm just going to go over to the light. And it looks like if we look at the SF Pro with no styling, it goes from medium to regular to light to thin to ultralight. So maybe this is what they would call the ultralight. Okay, and then in light, that one worked. Medium, normal, has changed to regular, which is the name for this one. Medium is medium, semi-bold, bold, and bold. Extra bold, this one changed to expanded bold, so we need to go back and change it. Looks like they don't have an extra bold, they have something called heavy. And black, again, not expanded heavy, we're gonna go to black. Okay, so now that we've checked each layer, and I'm gonna change this family name here to SF Pro. Now, if I did want to include some of those styling properties, so in this one here, the example, as you can see, is with italic. So I would do the same thing. I would go through, I would change from Enter to SF Pro, and I would go through and I would check each one and do the same process. But for the sake of this video and this project, we're just going to stick with the regular sort of, I don't even know what to call them anymore because Figma's confused me so much. We're just going to stick with the more normal, regular ones, commonly used ones. So now that I've gone through and I've checked each layer, the next step is to save each layer as a style. We can use these very simplified names, which just match the weights for now because the names don't matter much, unless you are importing your full typography styling and you've added more properties here like letter spacing and all the other things that go into typography. Feel free to create actual style names, but I'm going to go ahead and save these as styles now, and I'll speed up the video so you don't have to watch me with all my horrific typos. So I have all of my font family and font weight pairs saved as styles. And now I'm going to open the Token Studio plugin to import. Just a note, if the plugin, when you open it, looks drastically different than this right here, it's probably been updated, and if there's a new video with updated instructions, I will link to it now. Once the plugin's open, we're going to open a new empty file, and I'm going to rename this to the name of my font family, which is SF Pro. And I'm going to go down to the Styles and Variables menu, and I'm going to import my styles. Now, I could deselect and only choose text, but this file has nothing but text in it to import, so I'm going to go ahead and leave them all checked. And you can see that it's bringing in some of those particles, like the font family, as well as line height, all the weights that we chose, letter spacing, and a whole bunch more. So I'm just going to import them all. All right, everything is here. It happened really fast, which is awesome. And I have these typography styles saved, which Token Studio takes all of the particles of the typography style and imports them as their own tokens. And what we just worked on was the font family as well as the font weight. And what you'll notice in the instructions is to rename the particle tokens. And primarily, like I talked about before, the font family and the font weight pairings being a very specific sort of combo, I want to make sure that if I'm using these in another token set or if I'm making changes, I can very easily tell what these tokens represent. And so if I look at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't actually know what those mean. They don't really mean anything to me. But the value of thin, ultralight, light, regular, that means something to me. So I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to change the name of these tokens. And so there's two ways that you can do this. One, you can right click on the token, hit edit token. This says thin, so I'm just going to change the value 0 to thin and then save. And you can hit selection. The tokens aren't being used, so it won't matter much. So the first way was the right click to get into the menu. The second way is to push and hold Command on your keyboard and then click, and that will get you right into the menu so you can avoid the right click action. So ultralight. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for the rest of them, and I'll speed it up for you. So now that we've renamed all of the little particle tokens, the last step is to clean up the files so you can save it and use it for future use. One of the things that I recommend here is to create like a little visual thumbnail. So you can use Token Studio to apply your design decisions, and you can also create documentation with the tokens. So for example, this one here says Nato Sans. I want to change this to SF Pro. I'm going to right click on the token in Token Studio, go to documentation tokens, and I want it to say the value, which is what we imported from Figma, which is pretty awesome. And here I want to apply the font family and the font weight. So I could use one of the typography styles that I had saved. So maybe medium makes sense. And now I'm seeing it in SF Pro and medium. And I want this to be big. I don't want it to change to a smaller size. So remembering that font weight and font family have to be applied together in a lot of these situations, if I just click SF Pro, it may or may not work because they want them to be applied as a pair. So just know that when you're doing this documentation part, it might not transfer over properly. You might have to manually set the weight here. But it looks like in this case, SF Pro did work going into bold, which is great. And what else I could do is I could go back to my preview, and I can take this and I can duplicate those previews, move them back over to my file here. And those are all there. Maybe I want to put them in a wrapper. And I want to add it into this visual file here. So I've got a visual thumbnail here, and I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to create another page. Let's call this preview. And I'm going to move it to the top. I'm going to go to cut, and I'm going to paste that here. And I'm going to go to the thumbnail for the file, and I'm just going to delete this page. And I'm going to change the name here to... Now, why did I do this? Because if you have this preview on the first page of your Figma file, when you go into your Figma account and you go and find what you're looking for, page 1 shows as the preview. So that's just a little extra pro tip for you. Okay, so now I'm going to do this process again, but I'm going to show you what it's like to move the tokens from one set into another. I'll do it a lot faster this time so that you don't have to totally follow along. So this time, when I go to my Styles and Variables menu and I go to Import Styles, I'm gonna select just text, and I don't want all of the typography styles. I just want the font family and the font weight combos. So I can do two things. I can either go through and use the trash can to delete all of the ones that I don't care about. Font size, paragraph spacing, like all of these big text styles. I don't want the whole text styles. I just care about the font family and the font weight. Or I could have went through and I could have just hit the plus sign to say I want to bring in enter on all of these weights. Okay. And so now I'm looking at the the token set called enter, and it only has the font family and the font weight, which is great. And so now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do the renaming of the tokens. And I'm going to set up my file quickly for good organization. And I'm going to go back into Token Studio and I'm going to do my nice little documentation tokens here. Enter, this worked. I want this font family to show the value. So I'm going to go documentation tokens, value. I want this to be, I don't have my text style saved here. So I could just try to change the font family. It looks like it worked into regular. And this is all here, which is great. And I'm going to delete the thumbnail, create my new step. Drag it to the top. And I'm going to duplicate this, paste it in there. So now let's pretend that we have our full typography styles, which you did in the first file. Mine was SF Pro. And let's say I want to replace the font family in those typography styles with the enter tokens that I just created. So to do that, if you want to follow along, take your set one where you had the full typography style saved and duplicate. And I'm just going to change this name here. I'm going to close the SF Pro one because I don't need it. And I want to take these tokens and I want to move them into this other file. So I'm going to open up the plugin. And I'm going to go into the enter token set, and I'm going to go into the JSON file, which is the code version of what you're seeing on this view, which is the no code version. So in the JSON version, I'm going to click into the code. I'm going to hit Command All, so Command A on Mac, or I guess that would be Control A on PC, and then I'm going to copy. So I'm going to Command C for copy, and I'm going to close this out. I'm going to go into my test folder, and I'm going to open the Token Studio plugin again. I'm going to create a new set, and I'm going to call this one Enter. And I'm going to go into the JSON, and I'm going to select the curly brackets that are there, backspace to delete. It's going to give me this error because it's empty. And I'm going to paste the tokens into the JSON and hit Save JSON. And now when I go into the no code version, you can see that I have the new font family and the font weights here. And in the token set, which has the typography styles, which was just SF Pro, but I renamed it just so that I don't confuse myself, I'm going to right-click on the token, hit Edit Token, and I want to change the font family and the font weight. Now, one thing to note is you want to make sure that the new token set that you've just added, in this case it's Enter, is checked off and active. And that allows your tokens to show up in the previews here. So from font families, if I back this up, you're going to see that I have a new option. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go light. And if your box, your input box here is cutting off the save button, make sure you scroll down to save. And to edit the token, I'm going to change the font family to Enter. And font weight to extra light. And so I'm going to continue to do this for all of them. And I'll be back in just a sec. So once I've remapped the tokens with the new font family and the font weight, these text styles are ready to be synced to your project, exported, duplicated, whatever it is you need to do with your regular Token Studio workflow. So to recap, we learned a little bit about Figma's unique way of approaching text properties and why the text string values of font weights being inconsistent among different font families is challenging when working with design tokens. We learned how to use this template file to quickly add a new font family and font weight pair in Token Studio by saving them first as a style in Figma and then importing them. We learned how the import feature works in Token Studio, including how to use the plus icon and trash can icon to filter out what you want to import if you don't want to import the full typography style. We learned how to rename design tokens for typography. We learned how to export design tokens and how to copy a JSON file from Token Studio and paste it into a new Figma file in Token Studio, so we can remap the typography tokens to change the font family and font weights of existing text styles. I also showed you some pro tips on how to create a visual preview for your Figma files and how to organize them using documentation tokens in Token Studio. Hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.